What I really want us to do this morning is learn how to put together some of the pieces that would be in the context of the presentation that Dan was talking about last night. And I think this is where we sometimes fall off our wagon because we don't know what to do when we get to a place that we need the right collateral to do it in. So we're going to be developing here, giving you an outline and helping you process, and I think that if we work the right amount of time here, we'll get a little bit of practice in this morning to let you actually start to experience and tinker with the whole idea of proposal development. Now, I don't consider myself a writer. I consider myself a crusade kid that learned development over 12 to 15 years, and they call me a counsel at times where I come in and push shove and try to mentor and make things happen to create money. But one of the things that I got into in the last dozen years is writing proposals. And I'll tell you as we look into what we're talking about here, this is not easy work. It can be rewarding work, but I think a lot of times we don't do it because it is work. So I want us to answer a few questions as we plow through this. Serious potential financial partners expect something in writing from you. So I'm going to take you through some material that will help you possibly do that. Let's talk about what a written proposal does for you. This demonstrates to you a well thought through plan. When you pull out the proposal, you stop talking about ideas and you talk about solution direction. There's going to be two reasons why you're putting this together, because first of all, it aligns you internally. It is amazing when I'm working with a ministry and we start to develop a proposal, how many different views there are of what they want to accomplish. And the work that we go through sometimes, there was a time when I was spent almost 6 months working on a series of proposals for Steve Douglas and his team. And I could not land on half of those proposals for quite some time. You know why? The questions were forcing them to dialogue and they weren't ready to give out the answers. They meant they were not ready to say anything about those because they couldn't decide internally what the answer was. I remember one of those proposals was, well, I can't tell you yet. We're still working on it yet. Well, we had another meeting and we've changed our mind. And a proposal development process takes you through that, but the recipient, your friend, you're demonstrating to him that you have a well thought through plan that helps address a particular need. It helps align understanding and the expectations in your minds as staff and team leaders, and in their minds of what you're talking about. We're working on evangelistic outreach to reach all the kids in Los Angeles, California. Well, what does that mean to him? What does that mean to you? And so the document starts to say, this is what I mean. Here's what typically happens in a proposal. The work that you put into it becomes the language that you verbalize. And you start talking around the proposal, because when you give it to him, what are you going to have to do? He's going to expect that document is what you were just talking about. And it's a lot more fun to wing and pray. But if you're looking for serious kinds of help, you're looking for these kinds of things. It helps ensure good communication is clearly focused. So when I start talking about what the present realities are that I see in my city or in my community or in my target market, it starts to help him understand why we are doing what we're doing. And we're going to see how the sequencing is very important to this pretty soon as well. Here's another one of these reasons here. It helps eliminate confusion and helps eliminate incorrect conclusions. It provides the potential ministry partner something to review and prayerfully process, because in many cases, the nature of the gift that you're asking for is going to take this. You heard Debbie yesterday saying, I like to think about it and pray about it. What is she thinking and praying about? What does she go back to? What does she say, why would we give to that? What does it give Elle and Debbie a chance to communicate and talk together about the outcomes and the reasons to do what they're doing? Because when you leave, other discussion starts if you have a proposal. If you leave and there's no proposal, discussion stops. Here's the characteristics of this thing. You're looking at a document that is not a brochure. Now, most of the time when I work with Campus Crusade for Christ, they bring up color brochures, anywhere from 6 pages to 15 pages, and it looks like a Worldwide Challenge magazine. And typically what I would ask is your leadership really happy with this? And if the answer is yes, I know we're in trouble. Because too many of the documents that we create make us feel good. Now, there's a place for brochures. I'm not against color at the right time. I'm not against 15 pages or an annual report. But a lot of times those used are more in the area of public relations and positioning of us as a ministry, not for helping communicate why we need resources. So just simply because you think you've now got a really nice brochure whether it's a 6-panel easy piece or it's a more complicated piece, doesn't mean you've done anything except perhaps say, we just spent a lot of money showing you this. You see, I try to help you stay under the radar, because if your documentation brings their brain to say, I wonder how much this cost, you've already lost in the process, because they are thinking about something that you did not want them to think about. A proposal reflects a business plan. The majority of the people you deal with read and process ideas all the time, sometimes in 2 to 4 pages. In fact, there are some executives and leaders that says if it's more than 2 pages, I will never read it. So we are trying to align ourselves with the way that many of the leaders, the drivers think. It also to them implies, when you say, here is what we're trying to do, that you honestly have a plan. And I find many parts of our ministry of Campus Crusade are lacking on good planning, and they're afraid to put it in writing because they're still working on it. One part of the ministry I was working with a year or so ago says, it's taken us about a year to get our plan put together. And if I'd been on the partner side and heard that, my mind would have said, you've wasted a whole year of valuable time doing what? Because often these things could happen very quickly if you would just let them happen. Applies very careful planning that's addressing a need. Another one, a proposal helps helps the reader move from one point to another. And so the outline that I'm going to be introducing you to and asking you to try to use as your model is going to be an outline that's got progressive thinking to it. It takes you from this to this to this to this, and we're going to do that in 2 pages or maximum 4 pages. Proposal includes thoughtful analysis and facts that impact the mission. And sixthly up there, a proposal is typically white paper document of 2 to 4 pages. I mentioned the page numbers, but I say it's white paper. When you finish your initial plan, and you may have a 1 or 2 year scenario there that's tied into this thing, and maybe the numbers change. Maybe there's some fine tuning that needs to occur. It's really easy to go into that plan and within an hour have a brand new plan, because you just adjusted all those numbers to the newest realities that you know about. When you go to color and the print, all of that kind of stuff, I've seen many pieces at Campus Crusade that were out of date the day they were delivered to the ministry. Now, there's some resistance. When you start talking white paper, especially if you are in a position of a representative and you're needing a particular proposal, or you are in a position of trying to create it for the leader, there's going to be some resistance places that you come along here. One of them is this is a process that's labor intensive. The very fact that you're working on it means that somebody's going to be asking a lot of questions, and sometimes we just don't really want to get there because they keep driving for all this data, and we're just not ready for all of that. But labor intensiveness is going to be the part of the process, and sometimes we want to go faster. The feeling that relationships and history will carry the day. Have you ever been around that one? Oh, I know so-and-so so well, he doesn't need this paper. We can just go have a good visit. I can take you to a lot of your friends in leadership that have the tendency to fall this far. But it's very hollow to the response when, after that verbal presentation, the flexibility comes here is, well, I can change my mind on the presentation from one meeting to the next, and it doesn't tie me down. That's all dangerous to the person that's saying, what in the world are you trying to do? How about this? In a clear ministry plan, it shows a clear ministry plan has not been developed, but the funding is needed. And so the leaders are saying, we've got to get money before we even know how to get the plan together. Just go out and raise us some seed capital. And the seed capital has got to be tied to some plan that you're trying to take. There's people out there that will join us in our risk. Just tell them it's risk. But tell them in writing it's risk, as well as tell them in verbal, and tell them what you're trying to accomplish. Those are okay, but a clear ministry plan has not been developed, and so they don't really want to have anything in writing. Leadership really want undesignated funding with no restrictions. You see, a proposal starts to tie you down to how you're going to use money. What do we want sometimes? Just meet my budget. My budget's already set, and it's all about light and heat and rent and travel and X and Y and Z, and we don't have time to get this thing going, and if I do that, I couldn't spend the money this way because it says we will do X with the resources we have with this particular proposal. Why there's resistance is a lack of understanding as to what the potential ministry partner needs to make an intelligent decision about meaningful involvement. And then sometimes a proposal being used will seem restrictive. I would prefer you to live within a realm of focus than having the entire world wide open to this conversation. So don't let restriction be a negative. Let the restriction be a target focus to bring you where you want to be. Now, we're going to look at some things that these proposals need to have. It's tools or skills that we're going to build into it. We're going to just touch on these things. A compelling need. There are sometimes proposals need to be developed that are only isolated to 2 or 3 people. For instance, a compelling need for leadership development is not for everybody. You might find a few people that would understand that if they are in leadership development things themselves and value that. But the compelling need is not to train up and develop leaders. It may be an internal need, but the compelling need usually needs to be translated and be a companion to what the DNA of the ministry is. Win, build, and send. How does our project proposal help us reach out and accomplish the objectives of our ministry? The biggest challenge we're facing sometimes in development today is, what is that compelling need? We hear hundreds and hundreds of things that the ministry wants. We have to sometimes really work hard to see if there really is a compelling need that would cause a person to want to give to it. And if you're in the direct mail world, it's got to be very simple, compelling need. If it's in a proposal written document, it can be a little bit more complex, but it's got to be something that is limiting your ministry, and you cannot accomplish your objectives without this being taken care of. The capacity to think as a potential ministry partner thinks. This is probably a skill I've developed over the years, but I've tried to not think about how you like it. I think about how they're going to accept it. I'm trying to think as they would think. I'm answering the questions that they typically would have. And so when we look at the outline here in a few minutes, the outline's going to be a progressive thought process. It's all about P's, and you're going to see that in a minute. But it's a simple way for them to go from one step to the next step to the next step, because as they have dialogued with you typically, they may land on the 3rd or 4th point where they need to really gain their decision-making matrix. Now let's look at this one, collaboration with the facilitators. You cannot create a proposal in a vacuum, because the people that are going to implement it have got to be accountable in reporting how they're doing. We had some real challenges in the 90s by creating really nice things here and the field swimming upstream very rapidly because they could not figure out how to respond. Writing ability and uninterrupted time to wordsmith the document. If you're not the writer, find somebody to help you. It probably takes uninterrupted time on your part to get to the place that you're even ready to write it. And we're going to see those things in a few minutes, why it works. And a clear understanding of the financial need. There's a whole section that talks about what you need financially. We'll unpack that just in a few minutes to show you how you work on your financial sections. Last part is a willingness to do something here, and that's called edit and edit and edit. And I'm working on one for one of you guys here in the room right now. And every draft I do of it is ready for another edit. And I'll edit myself. I want them to edit. I want everybody to participate. We're collaborating, putting this thing together as a team. Okay, now I'm going to give you what this proposal outline looks like. I'm going to put and let's just walk through some of these things and see what we're meaning by each of these, because this is your outline. If you'll stick with it, I came up with it probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I live off these outlines. And this is the only way I know how to write now. And if you will flip over to 101, and we'll just use this one as the reaching every facet of every campus in metropolitan New York City. We're just going to do some flipping right now. So you'll see the differences here between the pieces. Okay, the project itself is in the title of the document. So what are you trying to accomplish? And I try to use the action words, reaching every student. Reaching every facet of every campus in metropolitan New York. That's in one sentence. I could talk forever about that one sentence, but it probably took us, in the New York City side, it took us more than a few minutes to come up with that one line. So it's not a fast trip, but you start by writing something down, and then you don't like it, and then you work on it, and you test it. And pretty soon I come back in. Sometimes I just say it's the reaching all the, to reach all the students, okay? And then I start saying, is that really the action? I'm thinking, how can this partner see this and respond to it? If that's as far as he gets, does he get it? The project is really summarized in the title of the page, okay? Number 2 is the purpose. I want you to look at that. Define in one sentence, and sometimes you can be flexible here, but I'm giving you the basic, okay? Define in one sentence the purpose of the project or ministry initiative. Include 3 things in the sentence: the key audience, the key activities, and the expected results. Go over to page 101. To establish hundreds of thriving spiritual student movements on metropolitan New York City area campuses that results in the entire college scene of the city being changed because Christian students are living out their faith in a powerful, fruitful way that impacts every facet of student life. That's the sentence. I don't know if I even like it. You know, I work on it. I think that says what they want to do, but it's not mean that, well, I'm not editing this to death. I'm saying, what's the audience? What's the activity? And what's the outcome? And can I say it in one sentence? Now, too flexible, because maybe it's just a run-on sentence and you have trouble saying it that way. But that's what we're trying to do, is say what we're trying to do so that we can land. And so you can also, here's the other value. When you're making a proposal presentation, you may not be flipping pages, but you can articulate and memorize that one sentence for what you're trying to accomplish and say it as if it was your idea. And then lo and behold, they pick it up after you're gone, and my goodness, there it is again. Okay, present realities. Let's take a look at present realities. This segment, you see, this is not an article now. This is little bits and pieces sequentially put together in a progressive way. Segments should include 3 to 10 paragraphs. Now, 3 was my idea. If I'm doing a case for support, I may put more. When we did Battle for Africa and the name stand proposals, it goes about 4 to 6 pages of present realities because it's a case for the entire continent or for the entire region, and we're describing the realities that we're facing in those particular parts of the world. But this is what we're trying to do. In 3 to 10 paragraphs that describe the situation or need that will be addressed, think of this as the basis for the compelling reason to give. This can include cultural realities, history, analysis of an identified problem, liabilities and barriers that could impact the objective, or conclusions that require special attention. This is where we want to briefly build a case for the need that the project is to address. Can you do it in a couple of paragraphs? Look over to page 101 again. We're not reading it now, but you'll see 3 paragraphs on present realities. Regarding what? Here's Life Intercity? No. It's regarding the purpose that you stated right above. See, New York City's got 8 different facets. So this present realities is connecting to your purpose right above it. In the present realities that you develop, it is secular, contextual information. It is not Campus Crusade for Christ information. When we first started working on this New York City project, they probably sent me 25 to 50 pages of stuff about New York City that had nothing to do with our ministry there. And from there, we started to build what was the key essence of the present realities that our ministry is facing in New York City. And I'll show you how that all came out. We'll give you a copy of that to play with here in a second. Because there's a way of using this, and I want to introduce you to the whole package. But you see, the present realities here are helping you move from my purpose, my present realities to deal with it, and now, with these present realities in mind, I have a plan of action. And that is your third section, is the plan of action. So now your plan down there, this should be 2 to 3 paragraphs, or an introductory paragraph with 5 or 6 elements or bullets of what actions are being taken to address in this particular document what needs to happen. So what you're doing here is saying this is our intent, and this is saying based on what we just said, this is what we want to accomplish. And you're taking this massive, complicated thing that you may be working on and saying, in just this short space, here is what we're going to do. A lot of times in Campus Crusade, we want to go from the project name to that. We want to get into the plan. And what I'm proposing to you is, unless you lay a foundation for the plan as to why it's important, dealing with your compelling need in some way, that you even have this plan, they are going to disconnect because your goal is to get that understanding built. And when they don't get it, they don't get it. And when they don't get it, you don't get it. You know, just that simple. Because they are disconnecting at the places that you think is very clear. I'm just asking you to work on that. 3 or 4 paragraphs. If you flip back over to 101 again, the plan of action for campus ministry is 2 paragraphs. If you flip over the next page, you'll see the plan of action for the basketball strategy is 2 paragraphs. It goes into it goes into a little bit more. The plan of action's got an introduction, and then it's got some bullets, 3 bullets. And in the strategy of the United Nations is 2 paragraphs and 3 or 4 bullets. That's usually taking about half of your document space. So you kind of said, okay, this is what we're going to do with the plan. And then what's the next logical step in a plan of action? Projected cost. How much is this going to take financially to make it happen? Now, in the ministry, we are all pretty cheap. We try to make budgets as tight as possible. I believe in good use of money. The steward wants us to have good use of money. But here's what happens. We don't often carefully plan this out. I think it was made reference in our time yesterday, where a major project proposal was given to a potential ministry partner, and they said yes. But the numbers were skewed and all messed up. And as Elle and I sat down with the particular leader of that ministry, the development leader, and he was very excited about this document, and we started asking questions about this section. It didn't take us 15 minutes, and everybody in the room knew we were in deep trouble because we had far undershot what we needed to pull off the plan. You in development can't come up with all this. You've got to get certain things from the people, and then you've got to challenge it. Now, let's look over to how this ends up working. Let's flip over to, well, let's take on the, it doesn't really make any difference which one of these. Let's jump over to the basketball the basketball strategy, which is page 103. I want you to look over at the back side of that, and you'll see the budget, the projected costs. It's called priority financial needs in this particular document. Okay, now, street to street tournament. Street to street is taking Wall Street to the streets, and it's doing these basketball tournaments. You could read the purpose and the other stuff and you'd understand it. But now street to street tournaments is the actual tournaments that they're going to pull off. This is not the budget that you have to fill out to satisfy Campus Crusade for Christ. It has got to be compatible, and the numbers have got to come out about the same because you're going to extract the money eventually from Campus Crusade for Christ. But street to street tournaments, and it tells you $219,000, and they're going to do 15 tournaments. And then in 2010, they plan on doing 30 events. See that? Now, those figures had to take my involvement to come up with those numbers. Because Woody Woodfin, who's in charge of this, knew what it was costing him, but he was bare bones. And then as we started dialoguing about those numbers and what he wanted to accomplish and what it really was going to take, and what was the reasonable amount, and then he looked back at what was costing him to do the first 4 or 5 of these particular things, he kind of hyperventilated because he would have probably put $100,000 instead of $219,000. He probably would have gone ahead and done it, but he would have probably done 7 tournaments instead of 15. Because you got to kind of work on this together to say, what is that right number? Does that include all the food? Does that include all the transportation? Does that include all the gifts you're going to get away? Does that include all the trophies that you're going to have? Do you have to rent any facilities? Are you, what, you know, and you start to unplug all of the stuff that needs, you know, and there it all is. And then you got to figure out costs for all of it. And then you've got to say, I better make that number reasonably attractive, but within reason that I can make it happen. Now, there's one thing I've done for these projects. Every one of these numbers have got your assessments built into it. You know what those are? More often than not, I find that the ministry goes out and raises real dollars and ends up going bankrupt because, oops, forgot that the money goes, 12% goes here or something goes there or whatever those things are. Now, there's a contingency line here. I encourage this because I know our ministry has got so much flexibility and there's breakthroughs and things do change. So when I get the numbers figured out, that contingency for unexpected breakthroughs is 10% of the above numbers. It's 10% to be spent when I raise it the way that the new opportunity leads me. And there's hardly a business couple out there that would not accept openly you have a contingency built in to your plan because we are a radical, fast-moving entity and they like us to do those things. So the contingency is there, and when you get the total projected funding required, $497,919. It's because we've done all the math and all the planning. We've got year 2009 and 2010 for what he figured out there. Look at the last paragraph in 104. These projected figures, that's intentional. They're projected figures, reflect corporate assessments and fund development costs. Budget projections are based on a reasonable growth projections and are scalable based on a reasonable per unit cost. Budgets will be updated as additional strategy details are finalized. Now, what does that do for you? And there's different statements, different places you'll find on these documents. I've said different kinds of things. But a lot of times what I want to do is give myself a disclaimer after I've said what I want to say. And tell them right there that all the numbers are figured in, but I don't have to declare the assessment of 13%. It's corporate assessments. That's a standard thing. So what you're doing, you give the numbers, and you may have to put a disclaimer or an explanation under them, but you've declared it in writing, and the person you're giving it to can see it, touch it, feel it, understand it. That's what you're doing. Yes? Any good business person, the question is what's the ethics about saying it's going to cost so much to put somebody on a court and then you put administration to it? Any good business person out there knows that he's got to pay for his operational costs, his health insurance, his employees, and everything else goes around building the widget. And if you make a statement that you've included all of that in your numbers, he is accepting your statement. If you don't put that statement in, sometimes they think, I wonder if he includes all of his administration costs. We're trying to say it includes everything that costs to make that particular project work. Now, I know we're running short on time. I'm going to hold more questions for right now, but that is what you're trying to do. Let's look at the next part of this, because I want you to see all the elements, if you would, of a project proposal. After your plan of action, you want to come up with positive benefits and outcomes. Why are we saying this? It's outcome-based initiatives to a great degree. Here we will need to outline donor and ministry benefits and relate how this impacts your ministry's mission. Keep the benefits to no more than 4 or 5. These benefits should be presented in terms that attract donor interest. The interest is to help the donors connect, the intent is to help them connect their investment to an outcome that they're wanting to end up actually purchasing. Now, you're going to have more trouble probably doing outcomes than you are going to be helping do budget right now. The reason I believe that, after 6 years, I'm the one that writes most of the first drafts of projected outcomes and benefits. And the ministry then starts to edit, because we are not connected to figure out that this money is going to produce this kind of outcome. There's 2 kinds of outcome. There's a spiritual component, and there's also, if you could have 1 or 2 of those outcomes, to be numerics, numbers, things that you're expecting to happen as a result. And so if you look over to the samples that you've got there that I've left with you, projected benefits over on page 104. I don't even know which proposal I'm looking at there, basketball. It's 5 bullets. If you flip over to page 106, there's 3 bullets on the Christian Embassy. And I know it's a work in process, and I'm not always happy with the projected outcomes and benefit sections that I even help you write, because you don't have enough knowledge to even figure out what the outcome is going to be. But let's try our best to say we are believing and praying toward this end because of this investment. And then there's 2 other sections you have there that I want you not to forget, because they're important, I think, for the persons to process. The person's responsible for the project. It may be you, it may be somebody else, and you write a paragraph. I got some paragraphs the other day. We're working on this New York thing. I get bios of a whole page on some people. Now, that helps me. I want the whole page, but I'm going to give you about 1 paragraph about that person. I want to position that person as being the capable one that can carry out the plan, and what his qualifications are to institute that particular strategy that's going to cost you $500,000. So it's maybe 24 years experience in the inner city, or it's 25 years experience on Campus Crusade, specializing in working with youth, and we start to build that off of your typical bio into a piece that says this person you can trust to do this particular plan. And then the last particular part is providing more information. That is oftentimes you in this room. And you're the one that's out there really presenting this, but this is where an email address, a phone number, you never give that necessarily up, and the person's responsible. But you can say, I'm open to any connection. If you want to even meet Joe and Susie, who's in charge of this project, I'd be glad to even make arrangements and you can meet them personally. But the providing more information is back to the person that's typically delivering the project. Is this kind of thing helpful in your thinking? You work on this in pieces, then you integrate that together, and then you're saying, can I make it in 2 pages? And that's your first goal, is 2 pages. Now, I give you flex. The bigger, more complicated project, sometimes I will do 4-page document and I'll do addendas. And I'll say, you want to see the addenda X. And that's what I did in this particular New York project, is I want to give addendas to some people that are helping us in partnerships outside, because one of the things I skipped over is the word partnerships. That's who else is helping us do it. A lot of times we're doing this with other people. If you're not doing partnerships on it, skip it, leave it out, because you don't see partnership show up in some of these that I left you as illustration. But then I see, okay, I need to give a credibility as to why we've gone to a certain source, but I don't want to put that in the document. So that becomes addendum 1 at the back of the document, which tells you now why we've picked 3 top New York City people to help us do something in the city, but it's not a part of our document except that you can read the qualifications of the people that are helping us do it in addenda 1. And addenda 2 could be, here's the details of how we came up with this one-line sentence over here, see addenda 2. Because I don't want to muddle this document and get it so heavy that it's overwhelming to somebody. I want to get something that's saying, man, I can read this thing pretty fast. I can read Christian Embassy. Wow. I can read that over dessert right at the dinner table and skim it. And I feel like I've got something.